And I respect that. Now, what about this perspective? And this was kind of alluded to in the cut. I think when they were officially, if you remember in the skit, they kind of first time they asked them, "You are Democrats, right?" I guess they were starting to question by the way they were acting, right? And they were like, "Of course we are. We're black, aren't we?" And they want to, to make reference to, in a sense, being Democratic simply because they're black. And so the flip side of that question becomes, and just want to hear your thoughts on this as well. So the flip side of that question is how many blacks will just assume if someone calls themselves a black conservative or a Republican. As you already highlighted, that's not necessarily your concern, right? But to a degree, we make, if you will, you just treat it as black and white, but we also quite often as a culture just simply treat it black and white and assume just because someone is a Republican that they are against us. I see that quite often when it comes to politics. I think, and I'll put this out for anybody first time listening, I am a huge advocate of, in a sense, quote unquote, more blacks becoming political independence. And so I just need to throw that out there for anyone kind of, just kind of showing where I sit with it. But I still want to hear your thoughts in the sense that as a culture, I think we automatically demonize black Republicans. Your thoughts on that, Queen?
I think that's true, and I think that's because of the things that the media decides to highlight. And I think a lot of folks don't understand that it's the media's job to get viewers. It's about ratings, not necessarily about truth and honesty. So I do agree that there are a lot of black people who will automatically go to, oh, well, if you're a black conservative, then you are anti-black. Now, to me, it's about what you profess, your perspectives on things. So I know that I may not look at it. That's my perspective, and that's probably very likely not the mainstream way of looking at it.
Yeah, because what happens is when I just highlight just to even highlight my own position when it comes to the politics of it. We're not going to stay on this too much longer, but just to even highlight, because I do love highlighting the idea of when I say pushing people in a sense to become more political independence. I vote across party lines, but even just mentioning that sometimes people will look at it and be like, "You're crazy," and go as far as, "That's dangerous." And again, I started this show saying how we quite often within our culture will try to push for us to be a monolith, but if someone outside of our culture tries to make us a monolith, like a Scott Adams conversation, if you will, the cut we played with him, then we're usually upset about being pushed as a monolith. But I'm always highlighting when it comes to voting, and we've all heard these numbers, but the reality is our community historically has been usually all in one way or the other. We know historically our communities were Republicans because, in a sense, they were the Emancipation Party, if you will, pushing the way for the Civil War to take place, if you will, not necessarily for the Civil War to take place, but pushing for enslavement to end. And so clearly we were Republicans, and there's history to the transition, but the reality is outside of that transition national election, for the most part, we've been one way or the other. And so when we start looking at political interest within the culture, within the race, if you will, because those interests can vary, I always say the advantage that every other race or culture has is by being on both sides of the table, because most of them are 50, like whites are 50, about 50-50, Hispanics are maybe at one point I think they were 30-70, but now moving more towards 40-60. And so just even that dynamic alone makes you a better power player, because being one-sided allows one group to take advantage of your assumed vote, and the other group saying, well, since I can never get that vote, I won't cater to any of those wishes as well. So I think being all in one way or the other is extremely detrimental when it comes to how to play politics correctly. Just wanted to throw that out.